Hello everybody, my name is NCSO7 and I think it's time to talk about the third and latest game in the Splatoon series, that being Splatoon 3. Being released in 2022, this game would, like the previous games, sell millions of copies and receive critical acclaim. I would get this game on launch and play around only 70 hours or so. So today I'll be talking about how this may be the best game in the series, but my personal least favorite. Spoiler warning as well for both the main game and the DLC. With that all said, let's begin. So to get in a bit of the history with this game, I'm not really going to go over the previous Splatoon games here because you guys should realistically know that. I'm not going to be like other people and bore you with stuff that you already know. So I'm going to assume that you all understand that the first two Splatoon games were commercial successes, and thus a third game would eventually enter development. It wouldn't be revealed until the Nintendo Direct in February of 2021, and would receive trailers across the next year and a half before finally releasing in September 2022. And as for the unused content of the game, there's a plethora of gear and graphics that never made it in. There's some unused events for Salmon Run that would make it even harder than it is, as well as a mode that lets you explore a map with bot players with no time limit. There's also an early version of the icon for the main menu of the Switch, which was just like probably an early placeholder more than likely. The song Without a Opt Out, which was for Splatoon 2's online menu, exists in the files twice for some reason. And here's a model of Scorch Gorge that was supposed to be used for the Tower Control and Rainmaker modes. There's a lot more stuff. Honestly, if you want to know more about some of the unused and pre-release content of Splatoon 3, I really recommend checking out the cutting room floor if you want to learn more. I'll leave a link in the description down below, hopefully, if I remember. I'll try and remember. But now that we've gotten some of the development and history of the game out of the way, let's really dive into the game. Let's dive into the ink, shall we, and see how good that graphics look. Graphically, the game looks great. Whether docked or in handheld mode, the game looks and runs great. I mean, what else do you want me to say? I've talked about this in my previous two Splatoon videos before. This game is really no different with its style. I will say I really like how more of the levels in this game have more of a ruin-like design to them, such as the tutorial at the beginning of the game and Scorch Gorge, just as some examples. I also love the look of the Alterno world for the single player, really seeming more like an underground bunker than the previous games. The art for the game is also really good. It's basically what you would expect from Splatoon. We've gone through this before. It looks great. Moving on. As for the gameplay, it's the same thing as before. Turning into a squid and firing ink onto the map to succeed, what goal you're trying to do. Yeah, everything is very similar to before. But there are some new moves that you can actually do. When swimming in the ink, you can actually jump to the side quickly after hitting the jump button while swimming in a different direction. And on walls, you can hold the jump button to quickly ascend the wall as long as there's ink on said wall. These two moves may not be a whole lot, but it is something new that you can do with every single playstyle that can make you a little bit quicker. As with like the dodge, you can get out of enemy ink a little bit more fast instead of completely stopping and then going the other direction. So these actually do help quite a bit. And it works with any weapon and gear set, so it's really nice. Speaking of weapons, the only new addition was the bows, which are pretty similar to that of like the shotgun sort of, but basically this time they fire several shots that explode once they land. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not really I don't really care for this weapon at all. I don't like it much. And really, there isn't much to say about how the game plays, but it really is the same sort of stuff. They didn't really add a whole lot of stuff to that. So moving on to the content, we'll just start with the modes that you can play online. You've got the turf wars and the ranked battles, which are literally the same as before. There's like no difference at all. However, the way you get to them is different, as instead of going through a menu to choose which mode you want, you have a lobby where you can choose what you want to do. Now, why is this important? It's because while you're waiting, you're able to run around the lobby and practice your weapon and playstyle, which is really nice. I mean, yeah, the first game had the gamepad mini games, but being able to actually properly train before your next match is a really nice touch, and it's honestly surprising it took them this long to do something like this. Then you have the Salmon Run, which is the same as before, although this time you have completely new maps, and you can throw the golden eggs as well, though they take a good amount of ink, which is really annoying if you ask me. I'm gonna be honest, I prefer Salmon Run from Splatoon 2. I like the maps there more, and again, it just feels like the same thing over and over. And while there are cool stuff, like sometimes at the end of a Salmon Run game, you might actually have to fight off a King Salmon. And while that can be quite fun and challenging, I'm just not really super into it. It's just kind of whatever, if you ask me. I'm sorry. But speaking of the maps, though, I guess I could mention that the maps in this game are pretty solid. I haven't really mentioned them in my previous Splatoon videos because I don't really feel like they're the greatest things out there, but they are solid, so I figured I should mention it. There's also the shops, which are the same as before, except the weapons shop, because the weapons can't be bought with money anymore. Now you have to get the Sheldon licenses, which you only really get after leveling up or using a certain weapon enough. I really hate this because it just limits how many weapons I can get, and it's the only shop that functions like this, which is stupid. You also have a new shop that gives you things that you can put in your locker. Oh, yeah, I forgot. In the lobby, you have your own locker you can customize, where you can just like put like some certain objects and stuff like that in there, like stickers or little like cool little collectible stuff. I mean, it's cool, I guess. I really didn't get into it, but I mean, it's a little, it's nice. Then there's the table turf battles, which I guess you could say is like the big new mode of the game, but it's honestly more of a mini game. You basically just use cards to claim the most turf on the board. And these are fine, but are nowhere near close to the best card game in a video game. Persona 5 Royals Tycoon will always be superior. And besides, this gameplay is completely different from the rest of the game, so let's get more of that normal gameplay. Bowler's Recon, it's fine, I guess. I mean, I guess it's fun to run around the levels by yourself, but like, why? And finally, we have Alterna, the single-player campaign, which functions like that of the Octo expansion, though is a bit easier. I would say that the atmosphere and levels aren't quite as good as Octo expansion, but I do love this campaign quite a lot. I would say it's my favorite campaign that isn't including the DLC, which I'll get into that a little bit later. And that's it, really. While all of this stuff is nice, there isn't too much difference from the previous two games, especially from 2. And yes, while the improvements are nice, it just feels like the same thing again. The online battles all feel the same as before. The Salmon Run, to me, feels worse than before. The single-player campaign, while fun, isn't anything we haven't seen before. And Table Turf, while fine, is not something I'm jumping to play. Also, there is no way to do offline battles with CPUs. No turf wars with CPUs offline. None of that stuff. Really? If missed opportunity on your part, Nintendo. But honest, overall, the gameplay's fine, but it's the same thing as before. I guess to touch on the music in this game is pretty solid, though I would say that the soundtrack overall is my least favorite out of the series. While there are some great bops, like some of the mission themes in the single-player mode, and some of the multiplayer, not many of them really stuck out to me, but still, the music in this game is pretty solid. So, that's the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you. Alright, let's get this DLC out of the way. Oh boy. So after a year and a half, we would finally get the big expansion to Splatoon 3, that being the Side Order. Unlike the other campaigns, this one is more of a roguelike and is basically based around completing a spire or tower without losing all your lives. Otherwise, you start from the first floor. There's 30 floors. You could choose different palettes, which are basically different weapons and stuff like that, and completing floors can earn you some currency that you can use after leaving the spire that can make climbing it much easier. This time there isn't too much story, as it's Agent 8 and the Off the Hook group, as well as a new character, Oct, I think it is, trying to stop the Order monster from corrupting the worlds from being perfect. Yeah, it really isn't that interesting. It's not really interesting compared to the other stories, if you ask me, but hey, it's the gameplay front and foremost, right? I don't like it. Everything now is randomly generated in terms of your missions and map design, but even then, they all feel the same. Most of the time, you're either getting a tower to the goal, or defeating all the enemies, or keeping an area with your own ink on for enough time. While these are fine, there's really no more variety in what you do. And every single floor looks exactly the same with very similar design and map design. While it can sometimes be interesting, usually the map is just a circle or rectangle with walls. It starts to feel repetitive, like you're doing the same thing over and over. Aside from the occasional boss that actually is unique to this campaign and are actually pretty good. I'll be honest, the bosses are really solid. Hell, even the final boss against Order is actually pretty intense and fun. It's actually one of the best parts of the campaign, in my opinion. But when you beat Order, you have to beat the Spire over and over, but this time with different palettes to unlock everything. And let me tell you, it really is annoying to go through. While the difficulty is selectable, as you'll have 3 missions with varying difficulty that you can choose before the start of each floor, it feels like the harder difficulties just throw enemies to the point where you can't do anything, which is really disappointing. If you were looking for a challenge, Side Order definitely has you covered, but geez, the difficulty can be ridiculous, especially any rigorous floors, where it's basically just a waiting game of when you can work on an objective without getting your shit kicked in by the enemies. And while yes, after each floor you do get a small little upgrade, whether it's like getting more ink coverage or like more damage or just like all those small little stats sort of things, which depends on which mission you do, it doesn't change the fact that you're doing the same things over and over and over and over. And that's the thing, it just isn't interesting. The story feels more like a side quest than anything. The gameplay gets repetitive because there's barely any variety in the floor objectives and they all look the same. And the fact that if you want to unlock everything in this mode, you have to complete the Spire with all of the palettes, meaning every weapon available to you. Yeah, it's for those reasons that the Side Order is my least favorite campaign in the entire Splatoon series. It isn't even close to the others. It's also the only one I haven't 100%ed, for obvious reasons. I know there are many that do enjoy the challenge and uniqueness, but to me, after being the Spire the first time, I had no reason to do it again. I do appreciate the devs for trying something different, but like trying to make a campaign that is way more replayable. But funnily enough, this is probably the single player campaign that I'm going to play the least out of all of them, honestly. But at the very least, when you do get the DLC, you do also get the Inkopolis Plaza and Square from the first 2 games as hub options. So honestly, that kind of makes up for the whole thing. I really like that. Overall, Side Order was kind of a letdown, honestly. I know this video has definitely been more on the negative side, but I do feel like this game does have great stuff. The improvements to smaller things online were great, the main single player campaign is really fun, and there's a lot of charm to the game. I think overall Splatoon 3 is objectively the best Splatoon game, but to me it's my least favorite. The online is just more of the same thing when you're in the battles. The salmon run just doesn't hit the same as in 2, and the DLC expansion of the game was a letdown, and the game just doesn't add any big new mode to the table. Splatoon 2 added salmon run, Splatoon 3 added, I guess, table turf, but that's like, they're more of a side mini game. It also doesn't help that this game came out after my time of playing Splatoon Online. I played Splatoon 2 online so much in the first 2 years of that game being out. Meanwhile, in Splatoon 3, most hours came out of replaying the stages in Alterna. I really do hope they change things up for Splatoon 4. And I don't mean just in terms of the story mode. I want them to give us the same core gameplay, but something new that differentiates it from its predecessors and makes Splatoon fresh. Splatoon 3 is a fun multiplayer game that improves on the previous games, but just feels like the same thing. This time a third time. Please, Nintendo, make Splatoon 4 unique. Please, I'm begging you. Look at like Mario Kart Double Dash. That game really broke the mold for really trying something brand new. Do something like that. Make these games interesting. Please. But that's all I really have to say for this video. Hopefully you didn't get too offended by my opinions. Let me know in the comment section why I'm wrong about the side order DLC. And consider subscribing. And if you haven't yet, check out my previous Splatoon videos that I did earlier this year. I'm glad to finally have the series done with because I've wanted to talk about these 3 games. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Peace out and take care.